Welcome to Newsroom, brought to you by Insurance Brokers Alliance. And it's right here, of course, that we comment on news events from far and wide from the perspective of our panel. Tonight, Mark O'Connor, Chief Executive of Southport. Welcome back, Mark.
Thanks, Bill. Nice to see you.
Broadcaster Tom Conroy, once again.
Evening, Bill.
And very ready to talk about Shane Jones' resignation.
Calamitous,
a shock?
yes, calamitous both, I think, for Labor in the short and long term. I think I mentioned last time I was on the show, I thought it was a mistake him not being the leader. I thought he would appeal to the voters that they were seeking to get back onto the
particularly
bandwagon.
Māori.
Yeah, Maori, the workers. He appealed the rough diamond approach. I thought he would have been a good choice, even though he was perhaps even slightly right wing for a Labor person. He had the appeal, and that's what they've lacked in leadership up to now. So I think there's a lot of damage there. There seems to be no restraint of trade and politics, pinched effectively by National to work for them. It's a bit like Dan Carter in the World Cup year going to work for the Australian Rugby Union. Not effectively opposing you, but working towards something that might. He's going to be working on policies, National Party policies. It's a bizarre precedent I've never seen before. And I think if you'd said to me 12 months ago, Tom, what could Labor do to ruin their chances of winning an election, they've trumped anything I could have thought
and not
of.
just
It's completely
not just any Labor politician, was it? I mean, it wasn't just somebody who
backbencher. That's right. He was a man of influence,
Yes.
of great influence, and leaving not because he's necessarily disgruntled with Labor, but lacking energy and lacking the will to fight for them, for someone who was fighting for their leadership just months ago. So on the face of it, I don't know how you could recover from this. And even though it's not of Labor's making, there's obviously some things going on behind the scenes that have made it impossible for him to carry on, and with the will that he had when he joined the party, only in 2005, which is a relatively short tenure.
That's right. He's done a lot. Is there any hope for Labor, Mark, after this, do you reckon? What are they going to have to do to come back?
Look, I think they can kiss this coming election goodbye, Bill. It's just a wasted effort, in my opinion, and they should be focusing further out than that. They're going to have to rebuild. He's, as Tom's indicated, Shane Jones had a significant following across, the average working bloke. I've got a quote here, actually, one of his fellow MPs, Damien O'Connor,
right,
who's no relation of mine, may I add, West Coast MP. He coarsely expressed the view that the party's now controlled by self-serving unionists and a gaggle of gays, and unfortunately, I think that's not far off the mark.
That's a very, very West Coast thing to say, actually.
Yes. I don't use the word rebuild, I use it reinvent. It's time for Labor to completely reinvent itself. You've got to remember what the core reason for Labor was, is to defend the downtrodden worker, weren't they? The slave shops and the poorly paid, and all those things have actually been fixed, thanks to their efforts and others. People have got 4 weeks leave, they've got extra days off, they've got, when they have to work, they get double time, and maternity leave and paternity leave and time and loan, all those things that they should have had are now in place. That's not to say it's all been fixed. We still need to help the elderly and help the people on the poverty line, but other parties are espousing views to do that. It's not a Labor thing anymore. So what's the point of difference? They need to completely start from scratch, because I can see in this next election, because of this last event, that maybe National win on their own, and the opposition has made a third of New Zealand First, a third of Labor, a third of the Greens. Something like that could happen. Suddenly, you're not the big opposition party. Right. You've got no God-given right to be the major, just because you have been. That time runs out. It ran out in the UK for a number of parties. Liberal used to be big, and Labor, and of course they all had to reinvent themselves. Only the Conservatives effectively have stayed as a one-power party.
And we've been hearing increasingly more from those other two parties you mentioned.
They're getting stronger by the day at an enormous rate. Look, New Zealand First, how they have now, they're predicting 10, 15, 20 seats. Who knows how big they could be. A few months ago, were they going to make the 5%? 12 months, long time, Bolivar. It's
particularly with Winston running the show, you never know what's going to happen.
The door's been open, and Labor's kicking the door open wider and wider every day for everyone else.
I believe Labor's come to the realisation that to be able to achieve some of their policy outcomes, they still need a successful economy. They still need people paying tax, and that makes them difficult to differentiate themselves from National. So look, that they do have a problem about where they actually pitch themselves and how they're perceived.
They haven't got long to do it either. They've got to fix it within the next 12 months after the election. They've got to have something that people can point at as saying, okay, I could go down that path with them.
Because if we think
it's
now,
blurred.
what
It's
is it?
blurred. The opposition's blurred.
What is it at the moment that Labor is? Are they going on about anything that they say? Look, when we get into power, we are going to change this big time. Nothing springs to mind with me particularly.
No.
So there's no. There are some small issues, but no great big issues.
No. They
Whereas
also need to find a leader that can appeal on a personal basis, which is what they've struggled. So they've got two problems. One, a party that you don't know where they stand, and two, a leader that doesn't fit.
And it's really interesting with the other two opposition parties. I mean, the Greens, well, they're green. That's forever green. They'll always be green. And New Zealand First is exactly what as the party is named. They're saying it's New Zealand First. We want to basically put ourselves before everybody else.
And starting, as I mentioned before, to espouse some things which Labor may have done. The elderly, those sort of tracks that they've always gone down are covered by them. But Mark, you heard Shane Joe speak recently. What was your impression?
Yeah, look, I thought he was very capable, came across as a very diligent, sort of perceptive sort of person who was in touch with what was going on in New Zealand, and he was championing a number of issues such as forestry accidents and actually creating real employment within the Maori population as well. So, look, he had a lot more to offer.
And he's a big loss in that respect.
I think he is.
Because he was bringing back those Māori voters that had departed.
I could see a comeback, can you, Bill, later on? Maybe a few years treating the boards and then suddenly pop up somewhere else.
Well, I was wondering that. I was wondering if maybe he's obviously lost heart with what's going on in the Labor Party. There's no question about it. I mean, he said he hasn't got the energy. Well, when you don't agree with what's going on, or when you sort of don't agree with the policies or the people, you're going to lose heart.
Then
you don't see a future.
You're going to go straight from that to applying the policies of the opposition party. I mean, I don't, mate. Have you ever? I can't think of anywhere else in the world that's happened. Not that I claim to be an expert in politics, but I'm saying I can't immediately recall of some of the situation.
Yeah, it's a big flip-flop, Tom, isn't it? But one of the other problems that Labor encounters is that they haven't recruited and re-engineered their core engine room, whereas National's doing a good job of that, getting new blood, new capable people into the caucus and around the caucus, whereas Labor doesn't really have the horsepower there. It doesn't appear to have the horsepower at the moment.
This guy, Kelvin Davis, has, do you know anything about him?
No,
how's he going to run?
Look, I don't, to be honest, other than the fact he's got some secondary school affiliation and background, and he's from the far north. He's got some Maori blood.
This is the guy stepping up
in his place. Well, he stood for Te Tai Tokerau 3 times.
He's lost a couple of times, isn't he, to Hawera, isn't he? Honi.
Yep.
So he's not won that, but he has narrowed the gap there, I understand, substantially. That might be because of the effects of his opposition rather than anything he's effectively done. So, but the gap has narrowed. So, but I heard him interviewed today, and I think he managed to fit in 15 cliches in 20 statements. It was just political rhetoric, and I think, you're going to have to do better than that, mate, to make an impression, to fill in Shane Jones shows, who was quite unique in the way he delivered information. I just think, if you'd said pick someone in Labor who could do the most damage by leaving, I think that was it. If Cunliffe had left, I think they would have gone better.
Well,
Jones certainly wasn't a clone.
He
wasn't a clone, was he?
No, he was. Which is why
thinker.
I don't think he fitted particularly well in a way would have rubbed people off the wrong way. But sometimes those people are the ones that the charismatic that appeal to the public.
Well, they had to calm him down earlier. What was it, earlier this year or late last year, because he was attacking the Greens. I think he was told, just to calm down a wee bit there, and don't attack him so much. Maybe we'll be working with them.
That hasn't worked out either. Weren't they trying to cut some sort of deal? And that was a disaster, wasn't it?
Exactly.
Because was it a deal or not a deal between them, or I don't know how that worked.
He supposedly had some quite close affiliations, links through to Winston Peters also, and that may be damaging also for Labor.
Well, that was a speculation that he was going to go to another party, maybe New Zealand First, and maybe that's because he was going to. I heard one rumour he was going to take over from Winston when Winston retires.
In that case, this is probably the least of the evils. At least he's right out of politics. I mean, if he'd gone to New Zealand First, that would have been an even greater disaster, I think. A
circuitous route, perhaps. You never know. But, because they're looking for a successor to Winston Peters. he's as likely to stand down as Tim Shadbolt is, I think. I think they're
did
going to
say
run that
that.
distance, aren't they?
On his
Successor or not. But,
His
yeah.
interview with Bryce Edwards at Otago University, they kept saying, well, who's going to be your successor? And he said, I'll still be here next time. We're not talking about that.
Yeah, that's right.
And, but he made a very good point in that interview. He said, back in the United States, he said a Republican president by the name of George Bush Senior, who had very little chance of actually succeeding, really, he said was boosted greatly by Ronald Reagan going around on a full tour of all the states and boosting him. And he said, when it comes to the time when I'm going to go, that's the kind of thing I'll be doing. So he's not silly. And I guess he accepts he'll have to go at some stage, but he said he's young, then he sort of retracted that a wee bit. He said, I'm very fit. There doesn't seem anything wrong with his mind, so he might provide some excitement anyway.
And that's all that matters, really. But effectively, we're seeing MMP at its best or worst, depending on how you look at it.
MMPing.
The fluctuations of how the Parliament could look on not a whim, this is far more than a whim, but on one incident, suddenly the numbers skew from one situation to another, remarkably. In the old days, first past the post and something like this would happen. Okay, National would still have won, but it would have passed relatively not impacting too much. But because of the influence of MMP and the other parties, it could fluctuate,
I
hugely
even
from one moment to the other.
Even a scenario of a tripart government, perhaps. Who would know? Greens, New Zealand First, and Labour.
But you can't. As a collective group,
as a coalition. Coalition. I mean, but who would be actually leading it?
That's right. You add them all up together, they get one more seat than National.
Exactly. Yeah.
And people to get what they don't want.
Survive?
So
that's a scary thought, Bill. I don't want to contemplate that.
Yeah, that's right. But
Mark's
a mathematical possibility. A
It
mathematical possibility.
is. Mark's very uncomfortable with that. Mark, does the prediction of a bubble which might burst by Forbes magazine, I was going to say Forbes magazine writer, by Jesse Colombo, who's connected with Forbes, we should perhaps say at this stage, is this realistic?
Look, I honestly don't think so, Bill. This guy's getting a far more credibility and airtime than deserves. He's a young guy, he's 28, he's got the reputation for making these predictions.
We're talking about .com now,
Yeah.
media prediction. It doesn't take much
It'll come
to
up
get
later
media
too.
coverage.
No, well, you're right. Yeah, we'll probably come on to that later, but he's obviously got the scattergun approach. He's picking on a whole lot of nations around the world, making these predictions on a regular basis, and the sort of information he's basing it on hasn't been well analysed. It looks pretty superficial type analysis to me, and look, I wouldn't lend it too much credibility. Some of the factors he's thrown out probably are valid in terms of our economy, but they're not new things. People who are in the place of power and directing the controls are well aware of them.
He was worried about the fact that when the interest rates suddenly start to rise, having been low for a long time, he thought that might stimulate the bursting of the bubble. And of course we are threatened with rising interest rates. But Stephen Joyce doesn't seem to be too worried at all. He did mention the fact that this guy was taking a scattergun effect, and that he wasn't going to bother about it.
Yeah, and some of the other leading New Zealand-based economists have come out and sort of knocked him over and said, look, he doesn't really represent a realistic view of where the economy's at. I think he's made some predictions around, as you say, those rising interest rate trend. But since global financial crisis, by and large, the average consumer and household has been pretty fiscally responsible in New Zealand. They've pulled back significantly on their borrowings and their debt levels and have actually managed things quite well.
How do our statistics look?
Well, I think we've got a graphic that we might be able to bring up, Bill. It actually shows year-on-year household borrowings against total housing values, and you can see really from there that from the big drop in the curve there, which was about 2008, 2009,
recession.
Correct. That actually shows we've been well below 5% of total household borrowings against those house values year on year. So look, that doesn't portray a too bad a picture at all. We acknowledge that we were probably in excess levels leading up to that global financial period, or global financial crisis period, but we've pulled our heads in since then, and I think we've learned our lesson for a greater period of time than 3 or 4 years anyway.
Now that's the housing debt there, is it, Mark?
It's a year-on-year borrowing percentage value against total house values.
Right, so around about 2004, between
We were
16
heavily borrowing
Heavily
against the value of the house.
about
That's right.
17%
Versus the value of the house.
Versus
That's right.
yeah, right, yeah.
I had to have a laugh at one of the economists who came out with some advice to counter this statement.
Yes.
And it said, just be careful because house prices fluctuate, they go up and down. You don't need an economy degree to work that out. It's always happened and it always will.
Yes.
Those sort of predictions, these kind of predictions annoy me
Well, he can't be
because
wrong, can he?
they are so general. And they cover so much ground. They don't actually give useful advice, but they can cause panic. They can cause upset without actually having a background. From a media point of view, and I mentioned .com and this guy, and I'd love to know, and I don't know if working from this side of the desk, how that happens. Why does one statement, one person, get so much mileage, whether it be this guy, .com, the Moon Man, or Kim Kardashian? Who decides on this universe that person is to get all the mileage? Because if I knew, I could make myself some money. What is it I have to say to get my company that exposure, or to get my idea that exposure? What's the trigger? I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. And all these people, they've got no substance, or not much substance. But they still get far more
Maybe
mileage.
it looks sensational. Somebody says it, and then the rest of the media pick it up.
I think that's the media's just trying to sell some airtime and some.
So if you say something negative of some scale, but you've got to have something to start with. Like, and I'm sorry I use Kardashian, but there's something that's completely superficial, based on something her father did, and OJ. It was something defending OJ Simpson, whatever. Got the family name and had an unusual name. And you jumped on it, and suddenly you become world famous for doing nothing.
Exactly.
This guy's claim to fame.
What's his claim to fame?
He predicted the global financial crisis.
Yes, he did got it right.
The time
there was going to be one.
Yes, which
but you can do in retrospect. I don't remember him. Do you?
No, like he didn't tell us, Tom, to sell his shares before that happened. But the other stat that he did quote, which I thought just didn't ring true, is he said that in New Zealand, agriculture only accounted for 5.1% of our GDP.
Yeah.
Now that to me just can't be right. I mean, there'll be other functions within those categories that relate to agriculture that haven't been pulled in the mix there.
I mean, what's he call agriculture?
Yeah, well,
exactly.
Yeah. So there we go. Superfluous numbers and figures, and suddenly it's on the front page, and we're talking about it on this show, and as are numerous other current affairs shows.
Yes, I think we should move on off that topic.
Move it off.
No
credibility. Coverage.
No credibility.
Exactly. Exactly. See, we don't exactly know the answer. Yeah. Tom, now, I hear that, well, let's just say you had some contact with the Royals.
I have it.
Well, you'll need to tell us about it. Almost contact.
Almost. Contact as close as you and I are.
Oh, that's what?
An unexpected contact
metre and a half?
of the third kind. Well, we're talking about the visit of the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, I guess, which I would have taken interest in saying that's a nice thing. I think they're great people for the great profile for the royal family, and I think I'm not a royalist, but I would say that I respect their contribution to the world history. It's a fantastic family heritage. It goes back to William the Conqueror and probably before. Not many of our families can track that back, and through good or bad, they've had an influence on the world. You can't deny that. And they're having, at the moment, a good influence because they're making people feel good. But apart from that, that's about my interest, and I respect them, and I think they're nice people, and I think Harry and William have done a good job. Harry's gone to Afghanistan, and William's saved some people, search and rescue.
They actually work,
They've actually done some things which
yeah.
have taken a bit of courage and backbone, you know, and they having lived a good life before that. So I respect them for that. And that was it for me. But I was in Wellington by coincidence, you know, staying in a hotel, and I work out of a cafe on the front on Oriental Brae there, and just by chance, at the time, I got kicked out of my room because they needed a service, right? So I went down to the cafe to have a cup of coffee, and people had gathered there in anticipation of them driving past. Again, I was, that's curious. The cafe, the Vista Cafe, actually has an outdoor dining area which intrudes into the road and actually narrows the road to one half of a lane. Basically, one car can get through the crossing. So when they pass that point, you're going to be standing very close to the entourage. Anyway, the word got out that they were in Kilburn because the plane was delayed with fog and they were coming around the corner. And earlier in that morning, there was a publication in the paper to say that there had been a dark car, dark windows, you wouldn't see them anyway, don't bother going out. So, but he said, oh, we'll go and stand on the street anyway. what's the worst thing that can happen? You could see the car drive past. Well, we went into the street and we actually had this an idea. There's about 20 people on the street, I suppose. Somebody should walk across the zebra crossing. When the car comes, they'll have to stop by law. You know? However, the police had anticipated this, and the guy on the motorbike came through. It might have been a female cop, I can't remember, and they said, "Please, no one cross the crossing in the next few minutes." Right. But because again, the view, you could see the cars coming from a distance. Right. Quite clearly, you could see which car they were in. Suddenly, we were at Liz Close. So I was on the end of the row of the people, and they drove through, and you could see Kate. And honestly, we could have high-fived. It was that close. Right. And she waved at everyone, stopped waving, saw me. I got the one-on-one wave. I got the one-on-one wave.
But there was a bit of glass and steel between you and her, Tom.
That's all.
Directly to you.
And I had to say...
Not to the crowd.
I had to say, I've heard about 50 people also get a one-on-one wave. But on this occasion, I was the last person. She stopped waving, saw me wave, one-on-one. There was that contact, that moment in time. Okay. And I had to say, it was a bit more of a thrill than I thought it was. I thought this is actually quite good, because there's a bit of going on
she's rather lovely. Very lovely.
But yeah, very nice. Yeah. But I mean, that's quite a close contact. You know? It is. But it's funny, later that day I caught up with Joseph Romanis talking about sport and everything, and I was saying, I actually thought that was actually a bit more thrilling than I thought it was going to be. And he said, well, you're a bit like me. We're unlucky. You're in a job where we meet lots of important people. And he's interviewed Muhammad Ali and Usain Bolt and Tiger Woods, all the people that have ever made headlines in the world. And he said still, he was walking through Wimbledon one day and they stopped the crowd so William and Kate could come through, and she said hello, and they thought, oh, actually, there was a bit of a thrill. You know, because of the statue, because of their place in history, I think. And it was at a moment in time. And she's hot. That helped. I had to say.
So the adrenaline got going?
So it was good.
It was good.
I put my hand up and say, I was impressed.
On that very positive note, we're going to take a break. Stay with us. We'll be back. Welcome back to Newsroom. Well, we've seen the tragedy, of course, of MH370 in the news for really a couple of weeks, wasn't it? All of a sudden, it's gone because there seems to be a new tragedy on the scene, which was 130 people lost, and very much a tragedy. Sunken Korean ferry. Nobody knows why.
Could be a lot more people than that too.
Could be a lot more. Yeah.
Counts changes every day.
Exactly. It's just been getting worse and worse, but. Rather interesting how it's news, then it's not. And it almost seems like the grieving people from one tragedy have been forgotten and replaced by something more fashionable, Tom. I mean, is this the way the media should be operating? I mean,
well, I think because so many children are involved, that's touched a nerve, and because of the incompetence, apparent incompetence of the crew, it sounds like today's news is that the children were texting help messages before the crew were. That there was some, I think that's part of the sadness of it, but also the slow recovery and the lack of explanation and the poor handling. Not too dissimilar to the one before, but it's just the latest. And I'm not making light of it, but Mark, every time you're on the show, some ship's sunk somewhere, and you're asked to explain it. But it's the fickle nature of human nature, isn't it? Is that we zero in on the most recent and forget about the ones perhaps we can't solve.
And I guess in context that there are a lot of passenger ships moving around the world at any one time. It's no different to a motorway, really, just on the water.
Difficult motorway.
Yes, it is, and challenging, and look, it's not straightforward. The mechanics of keeping a vessel stable are not the same as being on four wheels on a car, for example. Look, and I'm no master mariner. I have no real expertise in this area, but clearly there were some obvious deficiencies in terms of safety protocols, response times, and just the common sense factor seems to be missing in action as well.
Seems like nobody was ready for anything, doesn't it? They weren't ready to sail the boat, and when the tragedy happened, they weren't ready to respond.
Often those ships, the wrong person at the helm at the wrong time, or in the wrong state. You don't know, but
So it was a third mate. We understand, quite young and inexperienced. Captain not on the bridge.
Fourth man down.
Yep. But also looks like the professionalism of the senior officers looks to be decidedly lacking. The captain's bailing out, saying, "I'm one of the."
Literally bailing out.
Yeah, I'm one of the passengers, help me out. You know, that's just abandoning the post. And
not too dissimilar to the Italian, where just by luck they managed to find a life raft, and you know that's just a terrible look.
It's actually something which we don't really expect to see in the modern world, isn't it?
No,
I mean,
no, not at all.
we kind of feel like we've moved on from that, and it seems like a third world thing. And really, I mean, Korea's not a third world country anymore.
Definitely not. Definitely
There's a
not.
lot of anger over there at the moment.
Is that a complacency thing that we think as humans that we have, that technology has moved us so forward, we take nature for granted,
Yes.
that it's easy for us to, when really we're a pawn, that nature controls
Well,
us.
think
in
back
most
to the
regards.
Wahine, Tom. You know, that was a modern boat. It had bow thrusters,
In
had everything.
appalling conditions, though.
In
wasn't it?
appalling
It was,
conditions, and they thought, oh no, the boat's good enough to get in through the heads, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
And I remember
Very
it
few
well.
boats are
Yeah.
when nature turns on you.
Exactly.
There's no boats been invented that can combat that. If you pick the wrong conditions, same if you fly in the wrong conditions or sail in the wrong conditions, or walk or go tramping or do anything else, you lose most times if it's the poor conditions.
But you'd like to think that the safety protocols and banding procedures would have moved forward significantly since the Wahine
steering.
era. Well,
That's right.
It's easy to be
well,
short.
that's right. One of the interesting stats that I picked up today was that of the total estimated number of students on the vessel, 3/4 of them are supposedly dead. 3/4 of the 323. Of the other people who weren't students on the vessel, 2/3 of them have survived. 2/3 of
So how does that
153.
happen, you wonder?
I don't know whether they're all in one particular part of the boat or whether they're
But children might be in the cheap seats,
Yes,
in the
they
bottom
could
of the
have
boat.
been. You
which is,
wonder.
they've did it at the school, got the school fares, but
Yep.
you have to take the worst seats and the people in the better seats, which is why in the Titanic the rich people survived because they had
That's
the
right.
better seats.
Up
But
the top.
you should be trying harder to help the people on the bottom
Yeah.
than at the top to escape, you would think, because they're the most vulnerable, because they're young and two, because they're in the most difficult place to get out.
But those students are from a single high school in Seoul, so that's a
Yeah, I
huge
know,
hit.
it's just
Yeah.
an incredible loss. I mean, they'll take them years to get over that if they ever do.
You get that complacency though. You mentioned, there's lots of ships, millions of ships every day, and only one or two fail. It's like when the oil rigs fail.
That's right.
One
Yep.
corrupts and pollutes, but the hundreds of thousands that are operating successfully every day makes people think that they're all going to.
And the same
We're not
comment.
ready for the one that doesn't.
That's right. Same comments been made about that flight MH370, saying how few actual air accidents there are these days.
Yes.
Compared to the number of flights.
That's right.
I mean, a tremendous number of flights around the world every day. I mean, if you get onto one of those sites which shows the little dots at this, the United States of America is blanked out with light within flights every day and across to Europe and back.
Well,
and it's rarely we hear of one going down. So when it does, it's a big event.
Well, and technology means that they are a lot safer, but the human element, which seems to be constant in all these accidents,
exactly.
is something we haven't overcome. How do you test your pilots? How do you test your to make sure that they can perform? When there's a panic, they don't get off the boat. They actually stay and maybe help.
In the driver's seat.
And there's all those things that we assume happen. We assume the captain stays on the ship, don't we? We
That's right.
assume
That's
that
right.
there is some, mental testing of pilots or whatever, and you can't catch everything. But we also assume that when a plane takes off, it's tracked at one place and then picked up by another, and if it isn't, somebody does something about it. Not, the power is out in India because they had to save electricity.
Yes,
all those
that's
sorts
right.
of things we're finding about, we think aren't actually happening. We just assume that those things are
That's
safe,
right.
don't we? And we assume that the captain on the ship knows if he's not on the deck, he puts someone on the bridge that knows what to do.
We make the assumption that whoever's in charge is a very responsible person.
That's right.
That's the assumption we make.
Yeah.
And
They're not just doing their job, they're there,
that's right.
they're there for,
and
for
I'm
another
safe.
reason.
I'm safe in their hands.
Yeah.
Because you do put yourself in their hands.
Yeah.
And the one time you're in charge is on the road is when we get killed more often than anything else.
It is.
Because we're not very good at doing that either. Those sort of things. So there is, you abdicate responsibility in that situation because there are so many people involved. But of course, we've got to take responsibility when we're in charge in front of our vehicle and behind our vehicle.
Exactly.
It looks like there's various ways that they can track the movement of the vessel too, and shore-based equipment and also equipment on the vessel itself. So no doubt they're going to get to the bottom of it though with what manoeuvre or what actually happened. So
I think when all this comes to a finality, it's going to be a pretty sad story. That there was some gross incompetence. It seems like, just from a layman's point of view, that where that ferry was, doing what it always does, there was no rough weather or anything like that. It was quoted as not being a particularly dangerous piece of water. That it seems like, unless there was an absolute tragedy in the boat or something hugely mechanically wrong, there was reports of a loud bang. Unless it hit an old mine or something, I don't know. But it seems like there is going to be a large degree of incompetence.
I
but
think
we wait and see.
a couple of things. One is that because time passes, the investigation takes so long that people forget to put the two and two together. I mean, the reason you want to do a quick investigation is so you can put good practices in elsewhere.
Yes.
Yep.
And the other thing is our perception of what happens and what things should happen is actually dictated by the movies. We always think of movies and TV, don't we? We see things happening. We make assumptions about processes being in place which may not be there because somebody made it up or it just wasn't possible.
Yeah, perfectly true, yeah.
So we don't go back and think, well, actually, maybe we don't have the technology. That's something I saw in a movie.
Yeah,
we can't actually
it doesn't
do
work
that.
like that.
Although I did see a great innovation tonight. After the Fukushima plant ruptured,
Right.
they put $30 million into inventing a robot which has now been made
Yes.
that can go into a plant and turn off things.
Okay.
It's not perfected and it's still joined by a cable and all those sorts of things.
Yes.
But within 2 or 3 years, they've got so advanced that the robot can actually move and start to be they've got a lot of work to do, but maybe in 3 years' time, we'll be able to get robots
and plants
to
can
walk
be
in
set
there
up.
and turn off things
Exactly.
and shut things down.
And that's a Japanese initiative, Tom, or?
I don't know where the money it was Japanese made, but I got the impression there was American money or some money, but somebody put $30 million.
Under the
bucks straight away.
circumstances, 30 million is a pretty cheap price, actually. You know, if you've got something that can do that, and plants can be designed around that as well.
And, so there are solutions, automated solutions, but we're way, way away from the ones we believe are in place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tom and Bill, I don't know whether you've seen the movie. You talked about what you see in the movies. Captain Phillips. It was to do with
with Tom Hanks.
Yep.
Yeah, Tom Hanks in the Maersk, Alabama, and the pirates off the coast of Africa there. And
I haven't seen it, but I'm looking at it with interest. You know.
yeah, well, it's interesting. Like all the protocols and procedures there that appear to be followed quite well. But then there's a beat up the storyline in the movie is quite different from reality. Actually, what happened. And, so yeah, that's probably a classic example, Tom. But that's worth a look.
Right.
Yeah. I saw Captain America, and I wish that was possible. We could fix all those things just like that. Yeah.
Slightly different to Captain Phillips, I think, Tom.
They're both captains. Just one was more effective than the other.
Amazingly. And MH370, they are now saying there's some doubt that it might have gone down where it was suspected in the Indian Ocean. There's no wreckage, and all the questions are now being asked again. After all the time that's been, all the technology and the time and the navies and personnel, not a sign of it.
It's a needle in a haystack, and we don't even know what haystack to look into.
That's right.
It's that hard to find.
We have learned, haven't we, if we didn't understand it before, that the ocean is an extremely large place.
Yeah.
And I think maybe we're in danger of thinking that anything can be located anywhere, but it actually can't be.
I mean, to suggest that it's going to be on land somewhere seems pretty incredible to me, because you've got 20 nations helping in the search
Somebody's
effort.
got to have seen it somewhere.
The dry land component is nowhere near as big as the blue water.
I feel sorry for because then that starts the families thinking that maybe they've been abducted or there's some chance of surviving. That's a false hope, I would suspect, in the situation.
And it's a very difficult thing to deal with that.
Just shows you that, we haven't conquered the oceans really.
No.
Because we're going to build all those wonderful submarines and all those wonderful things, but none of them had any effect. No. We're slow getting them there. We can't really fly. We can fly in mechanics, but we can't actually fly. Yeah. So we're actually land-based people with limited skills, but we are getting there.
And quite a lot of arrogance.
And a lot of belief that we have conquered.
Mother Nature's going to be on top of us for a long time to come.
I was actually watching a simple thing. I was watching a bird on top of the building the other day. It was the most howling gale out, and the dove was only this size, and it was just. It was flying on the spot, waiting for its moment, and it just landed. And it just showed. And I was watching the wings and everything it was doing in this howling storm. It was hard to stand up in for a human. That's what flight is. That's right. That's flight and control. That's doing what you're built to do.
Exactly. It was probably having a fun day, I'd say, Tom. Rather than boring. Another boring day with no wind, Martha. Now let's head overseas. I mean, this situation in the Ukraine. I mean, it just keeps popping up in the news. Again and again and again. But Mr. Putin has definitely had his sticky fingers in here. Who knows what's going on behind the scenes. He's a man, 80% approval at home. His opponents, if they say too much, seem to end up in court, obviously in trumped up charges, locked away, taken away. Are we looking at a Russia that's very similar to the old dictatorial Russia? Back in the Soviet Union times, there's certainly it's not a Western type democracy, is it?
No, there appears to be some economic cracks in their economy, quite significant, Bill, that they may be driving some of the motivation for this recent action, but certainly looks pretty ugly for the US to be posting a few of their troops around neighbouring countries.
Sent the Vice President there.
Yeah, sending the VP, and it looks like it's certainly more dramatic than we've seen in recent years for this type of conflict.
I have to say, I was a fan of them taking back Crimea in some ways.
Oh, okay.
Because
interesting.
We talked about referendum before, or referenda, depending on how many you have. Here's the one where the Western world was saying you can't do this, but the people actually in the country turned out, 90% turned out, and 89% said yes. And they were actually Russian people. They've been Russian for years and years, and they were actually wrenched away and put in this other country. They wanted to go back. Everyone wanted to go back.
Okay.
So it wasn't a takeover. It was like, I don't know, Australia taking the Chatham Islands, and the Chatham Islands, we actually want to stay in New Zealand. Right. Well, because they weren't asked the first time, but they asked the people, and there was no suggestion of coercion. There was a question about how legal is the referendum. Do you want to be in Russia or Ukraine? That was the question.
Yeah. So they felt more closely aligned to Russia than...
They spoke Russian, they've always been Russian. It's only that somebody changed the label years ago and they hooked up with Ukraine. So actually I could live with that because that's the people speaking and having a voice, and which is why referendum should be followed when they're of that huge majority. Yeah. But now there's a bit of a creep, although I see that agreement in Geneva might put things to bed, but you just don't know. As Mark says, there might be some other reason he wants to take their resources, or not take them, sorry, share them.
He's certainly a man with an agenda, isn't he? I mean, he's not to be messed with.
But the trouble is, he needs to borrow money off the States and all these other people to survive.
Well, they're prepared to use the same weapon against him as they did at the end of the Cold War. It was basically, what appeared to be a military war was actually a financial one. That's what brought Russia down in the end.
It's been about a week since that Geneva agreement, Tom, give or take. It doesn't appear that he's too active in trying to stem some of the actions within,
he's not doing anything
within the Ukraine.
The trouble is, when you start something like that, it can be hard to stop. Like you put the idea in people's heads, but then you lose control over the people that are rebellious, and that causes a problem. So it's all right saying, "But stop it." Well, you can only stop the ones that he maps inside. You may not be able to stop the ones that have actually followed thereafter.
Just reflecting on what you said, Tom, there is a certain amount of hypocrisy, though, isn't there? Because the Chechens wanted to separate out from Russia, and they replied with tanks, field artillery, and everything else they could lay their hands on, and basically went in, on a slaughter mission. That was a number of years ago now.
You're not suggesting there's hypocrisy in world politics.
Well, God forbid.
You go back to the beginning of the show, there's got a bit here. Not quite as rebellious, but the same result. It's saying one thing and
quite so much riding on it.
But bearing in mind that what you say is actually true, but they don't like it when it's done to them. They certainly didn't a few years ago anyway.
It's funny saying, the same areas throughout history keep coming up in volatile situations. Crimea, which is a little country in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by water, only just attached to Ukraine and just by a causeway type thing to Russia. It's got no strategic value, but how many wars have they had there? It lasted, 4 or 5 years, the one in the mid-1800s.
Exactly.
And nobody won, well, they won it, but what have they ever done with it?
I mean,
they won it off the Russians, then what?
Was it strategic? It's never been strategic.
Was it status and principles, and that's probably all that was involved.
Religion or numerous other reasons. Doesn't take much to find a reason.
We better talk about some local issues because we're running out of time. And you've got a new crane down there, Mark. I'm very interested in your new crane.
Yeah, not quite there yet, Bill, but
having talked about the Ukraine, we're going to talk about the new. Now we're going to talk about the new crane, your crane. Yeah.
Yes, no, we made a decision to extend our crane capability. We've got a single mobile harbour crane at the moment.
Okay.
It's a Liebherr manufactured crane, and we've gone back to the well again to secure a second crane. And the motivation for that really was we have an important container shipping customer called MSC calling once a week at Bluff, and they're servicing the region's exports and imports very well. And we got to a ceiling where that we couldn't handle any more containers within the allocated window for that vessel calling at port. So in order to be able to boost the productivity and capacity, we needed a second piece of gear. And unfortunately, from a financial perspective for Southport, that means a couple of steps backwards to go forward. So for a period of time,
investment though.
It will be an investment for the future. We won't wash our face, but we're looking forward to the medium to longer term to cement that container activity in the region.
Because we have a picture of that. I think we had a picture, didn't we?
Oh, we have got a picture. And which one's the new one?
They're both the same model there, actually.
Oh,
so it's a slightly up-spec model from our current crane. We bought our existing one about 3 years ago. It's getting manufactured in Germany now, due to be shipped towards the end of June. And we should have it operating sometime in September, ready for the busy export season.
And that lists the biggest containers, those 40-foot ones, is it?
Yes, it does. Yeah, with no problem, with quite a considerable outreach to the far side of the vessel as well. So no, we're looking forward to getting that, and we're getting also another large container-capable forklift, which will add to our fleet. And
so what a throughput will you be able to, with everything operational? How many could you sort of put through in a day, if that's the measure?
Yeah, at the moment, Tom, on a 36-hour window, we can exchange around 700, 750 containers, and that's empties and fulls, empties coming off and fulls going on. We would, within a 24-hour window now, look to be targeting 1,000, 1,100 movements. So certainly a big boost in capability.
So it's very important for the province, really, isn't it, for exports and stuff like that? I mean, if it can go out through Southport, there
is a clear advantage, Bill. You're right. There's inland transport savings, and whilst we can offer a container collection option directly at the Bluff port, it keeps the other parties honest out of Otago and other ports.
Yes.
If that option wasn't there operating in Southland, then the parties servicing Otago will know
nothing like a bit of competition.
There's only one escape route, and the rates will go up.
Having said that, are we likely to attract any exports from outside the province down here?
No, look, to be fair, we're servicing really at the moment around 35,000 TEU or 20-foot containers, which might be around 35 to 40% of our market. So let's say round numbers, we're doing a third of the containers generated in the province. With the second crane, we'd like to think we can move to 45 to 50% over time. So it's a matter of grabbing more of the leakage that's already going out of the province, Bill, and that's our target. Yeah,
and it seems like you're saying the ship's calling once a week. It's going to be a fairly quick sort of thing. Get your container loaded up, and she can be gone pretty quick.
Exactly, and so whilst our guys in the crane are only operating for that 24-hour or 30-hour window sometimes, there's still a lot of other activity in terms of preparing containers for loading for exports, and also taking product out of imported containers, and also collection by various parties. So there's plenty of activity to keep us occupied for the rest of the week in that space.
More good positive stuff. We always take a break when things are really positive. Look, stay with us. We will be back for topics of interest. Welcome back to Newsroom. Before we go to topics of interest, a very important local issue. Our rates might be going up, Tom, a little bit, if the council takes over Rugby Park. You're in favour of this?
I certainly am, and it's not because I'm a rugby person. I'm just...
You just like paying rates?
No, it's about facilities. I mean, the rates are to pay for public facilities that can't make money. And the rugby park, the velodrome, the stadium, the library, the swimming pool, they're all essential facilities for the city as a package. And very few of them, some of them might make a profit on a good year, but our expectation is they're to be run as efficiently as possible, but there will be a loss. And that's it's just part of that package. We can't stand up and say, come to Southland, we've got all these wonderful facilities, and then mothball them. And as for the people that help fund it, the trusts, I know there's a reluctance to say, look, we want to save our money for the future, but if you've got to spend money on today's people and today's projects to have a future, and this is just one of them. And there's a lot of, I think because of the checkered rugby history, it's misleading people a little bit. This is actually a bricks and mortar facility for the city.
It's already there, isn't it?
And that's what and the council should look after it as they do for those other facilities that are used perhaps less frequently, but we still pay for.
I'm interested to know, should these other councils be chipping in, Mark?
I agree, they certainly should, Bill. It's a regional asset. It shouldn't be incumbent only on Invercargill City to maintain it and keep it running. The Southland District, or they get benefit from
Regional council, perhaps?
Yes.
Is that part of their role?
I'm probably conflicted here, actually.
Oh, you probably are. Yeah, ask Tom that one.
Yes, I think they should. All the councils should make a contribution to all the facilities of which any Southlander could get the benefit.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
That's what the councils are for. That's what the
Because
rates of
the
all those
other
places are for.
scenario of nothing being done and having an edifice basically in the middle of the city, you know, going to rack and ruin and whatever, is really unacceptable, isn't it?
Well, if you're going to do that, you're going to have a look at all of them and start choosing which ones. You could close them all and be very profitable and pay less rates or fewer rates or whatever the expression is. End of the day, you have to have these facilities.
So we've got to bite the bullet, and
it's not even that. We're not talking about a hard thing to do. We're talking about process of living in a city and paying rates for facilities. There's no suddenly we've got this issue. We've had facilities for years that have made no money, and we've paid for them. Pay for this one.
If it was regionally funded, Bill, I'd like to think that they could look a bit harder about wider uses outside of the rugby space. Look, I'm a rugby person too, and keen to see it well utilised for that. But there must be other opportunities to use that type of facility in the summer months and other parts of the year. And I don't think the blowtorch has been put on that hard enough.
And I think one central body, one central person could look after a whole lot of facilities. They've all got things in common. They could share resources.
Right.
I think we've got individuals and individual groups looking after all these things. I think they could be combined and be run more efficiently that way.
run it more like a business and
and share. You know, as I say, there are shared services which I've seen repeated in different places. Could actually be done by centralisation.
And maybe our hands being forced on this time. Maybe it's a good thing in some respects.
You should have done it before.
Yeah. But I mean, when you
Why
look
have we
at
taken so long over it?
when you look at the value of facilities for the size of the city, we do pretty well, and so now it's really a question of efficiency. Yeah.
I always get, when I have this argument in Dunedin, people complain about having to pay $10 the rates just because you can't. I always say, when's the last time you went to Moana Pool? When's the last time you went to the library? When's the last time you went to Forsyth Bar? The rugby one comes up every time. The coconut, So
Right. Topics of interest. Mark.
Well, Bill, I wanted to touch on the beat up that the government's getting at the moment about the Genesis share offering, and everyone's saying they sold it too cheap. Well, I don't agree with that at all. It's a bit like selling your car. You've got to put the right price on it to entice buyers to come and have a look at it. If you don't pitch it at the right level, they're just not even going to turn up and come to the showroom. So, look, I think when you look at those...
Horses a bit like that too.
Yes, as I well know, Tom, yes.
From a painful experience.
Yes. Accurate reserves are very important.
Exactly.
And that's really all the price was. It was reserve price. It had, in the Genesis case, it had the advantage of having what they call a book build, where some of the institutions come in and say, I'm prepared to pay X or Y for the price.
Should they have done that with the other ones, with Meridian and...
Well, I think that would have been wise with Mighty River Power, and that's where
that's
where they're off the pace, and it was too highly pitched, and the mum and dad investors got hurt with that. But if you'd been consistently, say, investing $1,000 in all those three companies that were offered by the government, that's Mighty River, Genesis, and Meridian. Then you'd still be comfortably ahead overall.
Yeah, I saw the figures. You'd be, I think, $3,000 invested. You'd be something like 3,214. Something like that, which is probably not too bad.
That's right. And Meridian's up exactly the same percentage as Genesis is, and you don't hear that mentioned at all in the same breath. So look, I don't think it was too far off the pace at all, and the government successfully completed the transaction, so they're happy. They've got their money in the bank.
Well, that's what they set out to do, whether you agree with it or not. I mean, and it hasn't been too much of a disaster then.
No, look, in my mind, it was pitched at about the right level, and it's enticing people back into the share market, which is important to keep things moving as well.
Right, and all the shares was obviously sold off, and obviously a shortage because the share price went up by 30 cents.
And scaling back of the applications. So
Right. Did you buy any shares, Tom?
I haven't got money for that. I have to waste it on employees.
Not wasted, Tom. Invested.
Investment. That's what he meant.
It's the same.
But I do believe you have an opinion on Easter trading.
I have an opinion. I have a very strong opinion. Previously I did not, and now I do.
Oh, right.
And I'm not talking about... If you want, it's a matter of choice. If you want to observe the holiday and not trade, that's entirely up to you. Surely we're not draconian enough to start imposing ridiculous laws about people not trading and inhibiting people's ability to make money We talked about the Wanaka Air Show, not being able to, service the tourists that come. That's just one example. But here is the unfairness about it in today's age. On Good Friday, your retailers who are having a hard enough time as it is can't open. You have this ridiculous law at hospitality venues where you have to drink with the intention of having a meal, and you've got to have a whole meal within an hour of the drink, and they've got inspectors out. Surely you've got something better to do than that. And I, as a television station, can't advertise, okay? Now, but on Good Friday morning when I open my computer, bombarded with adverts. There's nothing to stop them advertising. I could buy anything in the world on Good Friday on my computer. So why have I been disadvantaged to those people?
So you're basically saying the law is now out of date?
Well, you can't, a law's no good unless you can enforce it. And if these people can trade, and the poor old shopkeepers who are struggling as it is to compete with the net are not allowed to, well, that's really ridiculous. So you've got to say, I'm sorry, that's gone. It's media advertising is very difficult, but internet's a gift now. So
the intention of the law was obviously to protect employees before.
For reasons I mentioned before, in 1888, I agree. So, and I've heard that argument. People said, "Oh, yeah, but employers would make people work, and what? And then we would make them pay time and a half and make them have a day off and leave." So that's a tremendous. You actually don't have too many people saying, "No, sorry, I don't want to work." No. When you have to by law incentivise it so much. So that's a nonsense. That's the workhouse closed when Oliver Twist, became a movie. We realised it was wrong.
Statutory days are some of our most popular working days for our staff down at the port building.
Absolutely. There's no arm twisting, is there, or whip cracking or anything like that. So
I could tell you some stories about people who've turned up only for statutory days.
That's right. And we're introducing more. We've made it harder for people to sell alcohol. I mean, we're not making it easy. We're not sitting back and saying, how does society work now? We're saying, let's make up this really old-fashioned thing.
I think the internet thing is a very, very difficult one to deal with in terms of marrying the two up. It's obviously...
It's strongly in their advantage in all situations now.
It's been overtaken by technology in some respects,
You've got to appreciate that in time to come, your main street of your shopping centre will be hairdressers and cafes, because they're the only two things you can't buy on the net. That's until you hold your phone against your head and it cuts your hair. That's going to be it. They'll be the only two services that you can't buy.
You might have just invented something there, Tom.
Well, it's only a matter of time before it does. And then one final push for our Paul Potts concert. They've got to do that.
I'll do that, yes.
It's on Saturday. Paul Potts is huge with great reviews from around the country on his tour. Saturday in Invercargill, Sunday in Dunedin, and Tuesday in Christchurch. Tickets are selling, but we still have some left.
Right.
And he is apparently it's a 10-piece orchestra. It's a magnificent show, and people are raving about it. So just get in for these last few days.
What venue is that in?
Civic here, and at the Town Hall in Dunedin, and at the Aurora in Christchurch.
Right. I'm getting along to that, Bill. So looking forward to seeing that show.
Yep.
It should be an event worth attending. If you haven't got your ticket, make sure you get it.
And what's your point of interest?
My point of interest is that I was very sad to hear about the being an old climber of many years ago, of the ice fall on Mount Everest where the Sherpas were killed.
Oh yes.
Right. And like so many instances, it's not until something like this happens that you find out the conditions they've been working in. It seems like the Nepalese government has been taking $11,000 per climber if you wish to climb Everest for a permit. But the payout for the families here has only been something like $471. 40,000 rupees sounds a lot, but when you translate it into dollars terms, it doesn't really come up very much. 478.
There's a key connection there too, Bill, I understand, with the Wanaka business associated with the some of the climbers. Did you pick up on that?
I didn't actually pick up on that.
What sort of connection?
Well, they were associated with some of the deaths and had a connection in terms of...
Oh, yeah. Because, I mean, Mount Everest has become a very climbable mountain.
You can see a queue.
Yeah, there is.
People.
At the Hillary Step, there's a queue of people waiting to get up. I mean, if you'd said this to Hillary 50 years ago, or however long ago, it was 60 years ago, I mean, he just would have been, he would have said, it's not going to happen. You know, like I remember saying that cell phones, they were just simply not going to happen. Yeah, but
every other bastard is knocking it off, isn't it?
It would have to be, wouldn't it?
Oh no, the mountain's the bastard. We're not the bastard off, didn't they?
But without the Sherpas, nothing can happen there, and so they've walked off. They said, no, enough's enough.
Well,
That's
they've
it.
effectively gone on strike.
They've gone on strike. There's a Sherpa strike, and they said without the Sherpas, the whole industry shuts down there. So maybe that's what it's taken. You know, they're obviously very tolerant people and have put up with being underpaid for years and years and years. But with the death of quite a large number of them, a lot of grieving families there, they've just walked off the job. And I can't say I blame them. I think that maybe their conditions have needed looking at for a long time. And I think if Hillary was alive today, he would have been saying, yep, and you should have gone a long time ago. It's just very sad that it's taken a tragedy like this to bring it to world attention.
Well, that was actually his legacy more than Clement.
It was.
Going
at
back
the end
and
of the
helping
day,
them people.
Lifting their standard of life.
He did.
Giving them some standard of life.
Yeah.
That's right.
Because I think they were always used and abused. So it's a tough existence. In a tough environment, we go back to humans versus nature. Where you're only so prepared to take on that.
Exactly.
There's a risk.
That's what we've got for you this week, folks. But thank you very much for being with us. Thank you very much for watching. We will be back, as per usual, in a fortnight's time. We'll see you later.